We're now joined at the Boston Public Library by the relatively new Commissioner of the Boston Police Department, Michael Cox. Commissioner Cox, pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being here, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So you've been here now, I think, 7 months, right?
About that, yes.
About 7 months?
Yeah.
So you sorry you came back, or are things going okay, or what's the deal?
You know, Boston's my home. I'm never sorry to come back home. It's a wonderful city. It's a wonderful city to grow up in. It's still a wonderful city. And so I would never say I regret coming back in any way, shape, or form.
What has the first 7 months been? Not 7 months and a week or so. What's the first 7 months been like for you?
It's been a lot of things. It's been a whirlwind. It's been overwhelming in some ways. It's been supportive in others. It's been challenging in other ways. It's been, you know, this is not an easy job, you know, that I signed up for. But the people who do the work here are tremendous, and the people who live in the city are even better. And, you know, and so I'm blessed in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I've never run from challenges in general. And so it's each day it's a new day. And I'm learning quite a bit and hopefully not making a lot of mistakes. But I do know we're doing all we can to make this the safest city in America, which I think it might already be. And, you know, we're going to continue to do all we can to make sure we build trust with the community and make sure people understand that we're here to serve the residents of Boston.
You know, Commissioner, I've read and heard you say a lot talking about restoring or creating this trust relationship. You've talked a lot about community policing. Commissioner Gross talked about community policing. Commissioner Evans, both of whom were on our show, talked about community policing. How does how you envision it differ from what your predecessors talk about?
Well, so I don't know what they talked about with you. I can tell you what I
sure, please.
You know how I define it. I mean, community policing is about building trust with the community in multiple ways, and you can do it in a variety of ways. Because in the end of the day, when you have trust, you know, with the people you serve, if you have trust with the people who work in your department, when you have trust with all the partners that you have in the city, it's a safer city. No doubt about it. It's a better city in every way possible. And so, you know, we're trying to, you know, challenge and actually develop and make sure officers understand that we're here to serve the public and that we're here to partner with the public to solve whatever problems and issues that there are, or at least contribute to solving whatever problems there are here in the city. You know, whether it's crime, whether it's fear crime, and all the things associated with it. So if that means playing basketball in a community where that's how you build trust, that's what it means. If it means, you know, or certainly if it means locking people up who do heinous things immediately so people understand that we're here to keep them safe, that we'll do that as well. If it means, you know, actually educating people on ways to stay safe and understand, I mean, coaching up folks to understand that if they can contribute and help keep the city safe, that we're all safer in that way too. So it means a variety of things depending on, you know, what's going on.
You know, when you said a minute ago, Commissioner, locking people up when it's merited, you know, the one DA ago, Rachel Rollins, won a landslide. She's now the U.S. Attorney, on a platform that I think most voters could repeat, which was that there were 15, quote, minor crimes, comparatively speaking, according to her, that the default notion was they wouldn't be prosecuted. Not in every case, but generally wouldn't be. Kevin Hayden has said he wants to treat things on a case-by-case basis. Do you subscribe to the Rollins view of arrests and prosecutions?
So unfortunately, I subscribe to the thing that I think police, we also enforce laws. We don't make them. Right? That's somebody else who makes the laws, and it's up to us to enforce them. But there's a community that plays a role in this because they're involved with, you know, making those laws in the first place, or at least putting people there. We should be listening to the people we serve to figure out which laws that we should prioritize. Right? We have more laws than we can ever enforce. I mean, we have more laws than, you name it, we have a law for it. That's not the issue. The issue is we only have so many resources. How do we go about using those resources, and which laws do we prioritize? And that should always be based on the citizens that live here, the people we serve, not based on police, which we've traditionally said, hey, these are the laws that we're going to enforce, right? With no input from the community, and therefore you get accused of over-policing sometimes, under-policing other times, and that's why it's central that we keep the public first.
But very briefly, if I just can, if 70% of the people embraced, the people, not the police, embraced the Rollins view, so would you not say the people have spoken on What they want, Prosecutor Narr?
So, one of the good things about, I don't know, I wasn't here for that.
Okay.
I do know that we need to have a personal relationship with the community we serve. And those relationships change over time. They might change from week to week, month to month. That's why we always need to engage the public, because the world evolves and we need to evolve. And so as long as, we're engaging the public and hearing from them on a daily basis, then I'll make sure that we're on the right side of those decisions.
Commissioner Cox,
Yeah.
I've been around for a long time, and one of the continuing problems with the Boston police is you don't get the sense that the police respond to the public when the public does have legitimate concerns. After the George Floyd protests, the Boston Globe did a series of stories about people who are high earners in the Boston Police Department, and one of them was a guy who was nicknamed Pepperjack. He's had 20 investigations against him since 1993 in these most recent protests after George Floyd. He was caught in these videos knocking a seemingly peaceful protester to the ground, ripping a protester's sign, pepper spraying somebody. I guess that's where the nickname comes from. The 20 investigations since 1993. Then in 2004, he's accused, and apparently the charges were substantiated of double dipping. Claiming he worked details when he didn't in 17 different instances. And then we find out in 2020 that he's one of the highest paid cops on the beat, with making $350,000. So the public sees that and says, why is this gentleman still in the force, even though there are some in the community who defend him? Should a police officer with that many investigations and double dipping and all these things still be on the force? That doesn't do much for trust, I don't think.
Well, the way you described it, it doesn't sound that way, right? I don't have the facts as you have them in each, particularly in that particular person's case. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on someone that I don't know the information on. I think there's far too many comments on things when people aren't informed, and I'm not going to.
That's what we do for a living, Commissioner. So it's
yeah.
Okay.
So and that's part of, I think, my job is to address uninformed, comments, to address things that are put out there that are supposed to be facts that aren't necessarily facts. One thing about this job, and I'm not speaking to that individual because I don't know those facts. I'm not dismissing what you're saying.
No one disputed it as far as I know.
Right. Is that this is a job where you come on and the average length of time someone's here is 32 years. And we engage the public every single day for the most part during that period of time. High number of contacts with people. And let's face it, certainly what we do nowadays, it brings out the emotions in almost anyone, whether you like the police or don't like the police. And you can bring any complaint against any officer at any time for any reason, and it stays on your record for the lifetime that you're on this job. So you can look on someone's record and it looks like they had 16 complaints over a 32-year career. What does that mean? I don't know what it means. You have to go to each particular case. You have to look at what they did, why they did it, and all of it. The reasoning behind it. Sometimes you just can't lump up the mere fact that we keep records and track of every complaint that sits there, never goes away on someone's record, and then say that's who that person is as a person. So, but that doesn't answer what you were trying to put out there, right? I think it's important that people understand that I don't think there's a correlation between are you a good officer between how much you make. On this particular job, particularly when we're down in numbers, there's forced overtime. The salaries are, negotiated through a union thing, and so I'm not going to speak to that issue. But the fact is, officers are paid, through a negotiation, and then if we're short officers, they have to work, and then you can work additional, things, whether it's through details or overtime. I don't think anybody should be penalized because of the fact that they work.
Yeah.
Right? They're working 16 hours a day, and that would reflect in the money that they make. And so I just like to put things in perspective as opposed to, saying, well, look at this person making all this money or what have you. Well, the fact is, if you're a working officer, whether you go to court all the time, whether you're out there on the streets. And we want good officers, but we also want officers that work and want to serve the public. And so I can't usually speak to anecdotal examples of stuff, but I can try to explain some of the background behind certain things when people ask me questions.
We're talking to Boston Police Commissioner Michael Cox. Well, one more thing along these lines, and it's something that Mayor Wu has talked a lot about. She's concerned that too many fired police officers, and we talked about this with Commissioner Evans as well, get back on the force through arbitration. According to her, 1/3 of the Boston police officers get back on the force, and sometimes cost the city a lot of money because there are civil suits against them. There's one particular officer that you do know because he was involved in a case against you back in 1995, accused of beating you when you were a police officer, and he didn't realize apparently you were a police officer. And he was also involved in an allegation of choking someone, and that is the case that cost the city $1.4 million. Do you think that Wu is right in the part of the police reform that we should move from taking firings out of arbitration and using the Civil Service Commission for police officers who want to appeal their firing?
I think if we fire somebody, they should stay fired. I absolutely believe that. I think over a long period of time, arbitration awards have, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, have far been too generous to certainly police unions and representation about these individuals about coming back on. That being said, I think we also need to own the fact that we need to do better investigations to make sure that they stay fired, to make sure that we're contacting the people appropriately, making sure we're documenting things along the way, so it makes it easier or a whole lot harder for an arbitrator to rule against us. Sometimes it's easy to cry, oh my gosh, look what they did, if we didn't do all the things that we were supposed to do in the first place. So that's why I think it's important that we do all the things that we're supposed to do to document at least the behavior that we think an officer that should not be working here has done, and then make sure that we go about proving that on a daily basis.
Speaking of investigation, we're speaking to Michael Cox, who is the relatively new 6.5 months commissioner of the Boston Police Department. One investigation that apparently is continuing on your watch is this guy, I may mispronounce his name, Joe Abbassiano, who was a cop who was at January 6th. Has called Mike Pence a traitor, is on medical leave since 20 days after January 6th, 2 years ago, and is living in New Hampshire, but was well enough to come to an anti-vax rally. We did a little research, and virtually every law enforcement person, we've mentioned this to Mayor Wu almost monthly, almost every law enforcement person who was involved in January 6th had their case resolved all across the country. The one exception we can find is this man, who now we're 2 years and 2 months into post-January 6th. Can you tell us what the status of this investigation is and why he hasn't been fired?
Well, I guess you're assuming that not only was it investigated, but it was sustained against the person. Could you?
Well, maybe you'd say that it wasn't sustained. I don't know. But what is the status of this?
Well, so I would imagine that it will be relatively finished up here soon. It's not, and so I'm not going to comment on something pending beforehand, so we can have a reason for someone to arbitrate against us or things of that nature. But I will say this: it's either an officer belongs to the job or they don't. And our job is to make sure that we investigate and do all we can to separate the ones that don't belong here. Right? And we need to do that, and we need to prove it. Like us, our organization, like many other organizations, have people that make mistakes. And if they make a mistake on this job or any other job, the expectation is that you're disciplined appropriately, then you come back to work and you get almost a free slate, so you're welcome back so you can have a successful career. That applies to police as well. And so I think that's important for people to understand, that in order for us to have a vibrant workforce, we have to have the ability to have our officers not have something hanging over their shoulder when they've hopefully learned from the mistake, been disciplined for it, so they're allowed to move on and actually go on to have a great career.
Okay, I know you don't want to comment on the contents, but I just want to, Mayor Wu said a couple of weeks ago, ask me next time you're on. She's on in a week. You seem to be saying whatever the resolution is in this case, it's imminent. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, all things come to an end, right?
Is this going to come to an end soon?
I would imagine it will come to an end. Right? Yes, absolutely.
We're talking to Michael Cox. Yeah. Marjorie mentioned, just for one second. Well, you continue, Marjorie. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just going to ask you. There's a debate about police officers in schools. A lot of people think it's a bad idea to open up possibilities of over policing. Other people, like one of your pressers, Bill Evans, said when you were talking about before, building trust in the community, kids playing basketball with police officers, kids having fun with police officers, kids knowing a police officer from their school. it could be a good thing. So what do you think about police officers in schools?
I think police officers in schools it's always been a good thing for the most part that it's existed. I think people might have memories if they ever encounter police officers in school. It's usually a positive memory, whether it's someone's being taught something about drug awareness or just officer-friendly programs. And I give an example. When I was in Ann Arbor, there was a program that they had there. They had been doing for 40 years, and there were adults, fairly old adults saying that all they remember is this positive experience they had as a police officer in kindergarten, teaching them how to ride a bicycle, safety skills, getting them, helmets on this and working with kids in school. That stayed with these people throughout their whole life. So,
Yeah.
This whole imagery of, police are here to do something bad doesn't exist in those folks because for the most part, the only, and this is for most people, the only contact they ever had with a police officer was positive at an early age before the biases of the world creep in there and change someone's view of a profession forever and ever. So I'm a person of color. I've been this way my whole life, if that's a shock to you all, right?
We didn't know that. I thought maybe
If that's a shock to you all. But the reality is I've lived in this certainly the city, the world, the state, the country my whole life, and had some bad experiences by perception. People made, when I was younger, certainly as a young African-American male, made people feel uncomfortable being in their presence. It didn't matter what I was doing or what happened. I just did because they were biased in some way, shape, or form. Well, I come on this job, and I know this job, it's a tremendous opportunity to help people. We do outrageously great things, to support and help people. And as a person of color, I come on, and the same language and imagery as a child that I felt not as a police officer, but as just a regular person growing up, I hear that about police in general,
Yeah.
right? I hear that about, oh my God, we don't want them here because they don't make me feel comfortable. Oh my God, I don't want them there because of I'm triggered, right? And I get it. People are triggered by a lot of things. When my kids were little, they were afraid of the dark. I didn't say never walk into the dark again. Right? I tried to help them through it because in the end, it was their issue. I tried to help them through it and let them know, turn the light on, you see, it's nothing to be afraid of here. There's nothing to be afraid of about policing. Policing being done now is better than it's ever been done in the history of policing. But the reality is the narrative that's out there is almost the opposite because of social media and things of that nature. When you have to scan the entire United States to find one example here or one example there, that is not a systemic problem.
So you'd like to see cops back in the schools? That the one word? That is your position, right?
I would like to see. Sure. I mean, when I say that, we have a role. I mean, if the schools don't want us there, we don't have any role there, right? We should never be someplace where we're not wanted.
Okay.
But the fact is, I think we have value.
When you say a minute ago, you were describing your experience as a young black kid, and we should have introduced you by saying, for those who don't know you were on the force here for most of your life, and then you went to Ann Arbor, ran it there, you were hired to come back here and be the commissioner here. It's not just anecdotal stuff. You were in Boston when the Supreme Judicial Court, the highest court in the state, made what I think is the most underreported decision I've ever heard in my life, is they said if a young black man runs away from a police officer, heretofore, you can draw a conclusion that he did something wrong. Their unanimous decision was, because of so much racial profiling by the police, 7-0, I think the vote was, if I remember correctly, you can no longer have that presumption. So it is, at least in this city, according to the SJC, historically, it's broader than just a case here and a case there. Correct, Commissioner?
I guess by your premise, you're saying that the law is saying that you can't chase someone just because they're running because they didn't do anything. I get that.
It's not my premise. It's the SJC's.
I get that. Yeah. So what's the question on that?
I guess the question is, it's not just an anecdotal case here or there that people cite. This is SJC saying there was essentially a trend that caused them to make, at least in my estimation, a radical conclusion.
I mean, I think what you're talking about really was also connected to profiling. When you're not only profiling that, you run and chase somebody, but then you run and chase someone and then they add a weapon on them or something of that sort. And so that evidence couldn't be used because the fact is they're saying, basically you were profiling people in the beginning and you got lucky because that individual happened to have a weapon and you shouldn't have done it in the first place. And you're right, and I do agree. We should not profile in that way. There's a whole host of people that could be running. In a few weeks, they'll have this whole street full of people running. As police, we shouldn't be running and chasing them just because they're running. But if you throw a whole bunch of other factors involved with that, then maybe that's something different why we might want to question somebody.
You've been asked about 1,000 times about what Marjorie referenced in passing before, being beaten by fellow cops when you were an undercover cop 20-some years ago. We're not going to go in depth into this, but how do you think that experience, that was in 95, if I remember correctly, how did that experience shape who you are and how you act as the commissioner of the police department?
Oh, man, it's hard to say how it shaped me, because I've been shaped, and I'm probably always going to continue to grow and develop in some way, hopefully. I will say this, is that I was naive in the sense that this job, you have the opportunity to help a lot of people, and I thought, and it is honorable work, and I certainly thought it was honorable work there. It opened my eyes to the sense that, we can do bad things without supervision. Bad things can happen by individuals with good intentions if you're not monitored, if you're not developed, if it's not supervised, and things of that nature. And then what I also understood is that, part of the culture of it is because sometimes it's an us versus them environment. It's hard to talk about change, improve, and things of that nature internally, because the fact is there's so much external criticism, right? And so I learned quite a bit in a lot of ways, and for the most part I dedicated my life to making sure, from the inside out, how can you fix an organization to make sure, one, people understand truly the good work that's being done there, because that's important. In order to attract good people and keep good people, people need to understand the good work that we do and why we're here and who we're here to serve. And secondly, like any organization, we should get better and develop and grow. And this is a profession, and we should make sure that people understand that, and internally make sure that we're always developing and growing and evolving as a profession. And in the last part is that every person here needs to understand that we're here to serve the public, right? And we need to grow and develop, and the public's needs will change, and so we need to change. Policing has been always very slow to change, but the reality is that we need to always change in accordance to what the public needs, the city needs in that way. And change is not easy. It's not easy at all. And most people don't even understand what's involved in making change. And so that is part of, I think, my biggest role, is to go through and make sure people understand that, we are a professional organization who's in the midst of trying to change, to make sure that we adapt to what's going on.
Let me just state the obvious. You're a bigger man than I am. That goes without saying, Commissioner.
Well, and weight, maybe.
No, in many more ways.
I have some fan mail for you, Commissioner. This is a text from Cindy Jackwith in Bolton, Mass. She says, I was good friends with Michael and his family in Dorchester. He's my top 5 list of people I know with the highest integrity. Wonderful, kind, thoughtful, smart, honest man. Boston is lucky to have him. He was also helpful during my adoption process. Can't say enough about him and his family. There you go. She's not related to you, is she, Commissioner?
She is not. She's a wonderful person. And I haven't talked to her in many years. That's good to hear from her.
Well, I wonder, we're almost out of time here, but just really quickly, I do think that cameras, cell phones, all these second eyes on police is a good thing for police, ultimately, I think.
I think so, too. I think it's a good thing for everyone. I mean, we're in the business of trying to make sure people are safe. Cameras have a way of helping us identify people and actually solve crimes without that bias that happens sometimes with individually, identifying people without, photo or cameras and things in general.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today. We really appreciate it. We hope you come back.
If I'm invited, I will.
Okay.
I always go where I'm invited,
right? Yeah, and you should come here, because
Commissioner.
it's a very swank operation.
This is
here
a
at the
beautiful
Boston Public
location,
Library.
yes.
Newsfeed Cafe over there.
And a wonderful, astute audience.
That's right.
I like them the best.
That's right. Thank you very much. We appreciate you very much coming.
Thank you very
Commissioner.
much for having me.
Good to
We're
meet
gonna
you.
speak-